If you follow contemporary horror literature, then there's a good chance that you've heard the name Stephen Graham Jones before. He is a horror author that has written several novels and novellas and collections of short stories at this point, and he just might be my favorite horror author working today, maybe just behind Ian Reid. I had a buddy of mine suggest that I read The Only Good Indians, and I ended up really loving that book. And I followed that up by reading his Indian Lake trilogy, and the first book in this trilogy is called My Heart is a Chainsaw, which will be the topic of this video. My Heart is a Chainsaw is a slasher horror mystery novel that follows a 17-year-old high school senior named Jade Daniels as she starts to uncover the truth behind a string of mysterious deaths in her small town. The twist on this classic formula is that Jade is obsessed with slasher movies. Her mind permanently exists in a state of constant references to the violent on-screen deaths of various unsuspecting victims. So she is convinced from the outset that all of these deaths are due to a slasher that has recently come to town, and she couldn't be more excited about this. On paper, I shouldn't have enjoyed this book. Jade Daniels, the main character, should be completely insufferable, but her constant references and quips never make her feel cheesy. They just kind of feel like a mask that hides something deeper. So today I'm going to be going through the entire story of this novel and analyzing some of the themes and theories that I picked up on when I read it. I do need to give a content warning. This book contains descriptions of self-harm, suicide, and also discusses quite a bit of sexual assault. There's also just a ton of violence in it, but I did tell you this was a slasher book. I won't be going into intense detail regarding the self-harm, but it is an essential part of this story and it needs to be addressed. So if that makes you feel uncomfortable or you don't want to engage with a story that has those elements, then I suggest you watch a different video of mine. But if you're along for the ride, then I think you're in for a real treat. I really enjoyed this novel and I knew that I had to make a video on it when I read it. I truly think Stephen Graham Jones has something very, very special on his hands here. Remember to subscribe if you haven't yet. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subs by the end of 2025. My old goal was 50k subs, but you guys are already helping me smash that goal. Thank you guys all so much for the support. But enough intro, let's get into the tragically anticipated horror of My Heart is a Chainsaw. Full spoilers ahead, by the way. Before we fully get into the story of the book itself, we should talk about the author. Stephen Graham Jones is a Native American author and professor working at the University of Colorado Boulder. And something fascinating about his writing is the fact that his stories almost always revolve around Native Americans. Our main character in this story, Jade Daniels, is half Native. This book doesn't have as much to do with the Native American experience as something like The Only Good Indians, but there are certainly themes of colonization in this book that are certainly based on Jones's experience as a Native American. Jones and Jade Daniels are Blackfeet Native Americans, and this particular trilogy takes place in the fictional small town of Proof Rock, Idaho. I actually went to college in Idaho, and it's kind of fun to see so many names of towns that I recognize, like Shoshone or Ammon or Blackfoot in this book. It helped me picture this little town so much better than I could with the story that takes place somewhere that I've never been to. Jones also has a love and a reverence for horror history in a way that is readily apparent in his writing. Jade Daniels spouts off horror trivia in a consistent stream that I can only imagine comes straight from Jones's brain. He manages to do this without it ever feeling annoying either. I typically really dislike meta elements in a story, and this book is a recipe for disaster in that regard, but it never feels self-referential, and the slasher tropes feel much more like the wishful manifestations of Jade rather than anything contrived. I also really appreciate the way that Jones weaves the Native American experience into his writing. The Only Good Indians did this masterfully, and I felt like I better understood the current Native American experience in a way that I had never been clued into before. But with all this, what I'm saying is that I think Stephen Graham Jones is a really great author, and I really, really enjoyed this book. So let's start talking about what actually happens in it. So buckle up, this one's definitely going to be a wild ride. The book opens on a clear night in the town of Proof Rock, Idaho. We start by following a couple of Dutch students named Sven and Lot that are on a road trip across the US. They've stopped in Proof Rock in order to check out Indian Lake, which seems to have some sort of storied history that we'll talk about later. Sven and Lot are a couple, and they flirt while on shore of the empty lake, and Sven convinces Lot to go skinny dipping, and he finds a canoe that's tied to the dock. There isn't anyone else around, so the two of them jump into the canoe and try to push themselves out onto the lake. They realize that they don't have anything to paddle with, so Sven swims back to get the lid of their styrofoam cooler. As he swims through the freezing lake, Lot puts her phone in a sandwich bag and starts to record. She smells something odd in the air and looks to the dark water around her to see something bloody, red, and hairy in the water. As Sven starts to swim back towards the canoe, Lot says that she's scared and wants to head back. he tells her that she's just seeing fish guts and that she's overreacting. She feels the canoe drift further out into the lake until it hits something solid that she can't see. She then hears a distinct, wet, ripping sound. She calls out to Sven, but he doesn't answer, and she starts to paddle back to the shore, and the boat hits something solid again. Her cell phone footage captures her looking into the water with all of its gore and blood and viscera and hair before seeing there is a dead horse floating up to her. She starts swimming back to the shore, and her hand brushes the styrofoam cooler lid that Sven had. It's covered in blood. The last thing the camera records is the first part of Lot's scream, but she doesn't get to finish it. The next chapter shifts our perspective over to our main character, Jade Daniels. Jade is a high school senior who has lived in Proof Rock her whole life. She kind of hates the town, but thinks that she'll never be able to get out and live somewhere else. She thinks she deserves to rot away in Proof Rock for the rest of her life. Jade's self-loathing, depression, and self-harm are all prominent aspects of her character. She has scars on her thighs and arms from her history of self-harm, and lives in a run-down mobile home with her scumbag of a dad, Tab Daniels. Tab is the only fully Native American in Proof Rock, and Jade is his only kid with his ex-wife, Kimmy. He got her pregnant during a one-night stand, which turned into a tumultuous relationship that ended years ago. Despite this, they both live in town, but Jade hasn't spoken to her mom in years and seems to be harboring a grudge against her. We find Jade storming out of her house in her custodial coveralls that she almost always wears because they look like what Michael Myers wore in Halloween. She's also tried to dye her hair green, but it didn't really take, and it has come out as sort of like a muddy orange color. Her dad made a snarky remark about her eating too many carrots, only for her dad's creepy friend, Rexall, to say that he has a carrot she could eat. Keep in mind the fact that Jade is 17 and underage at this point. Both Tab and Rexall are both total scumbags through and through. Rexall is the lead custodian for the elementary and high school, and Jade works underneath him, and he hides cameras all over the school, in the bathrooms, and in the women's locker room. Jade knows this, but doesn't want to expose Rexall for what he is in fear of retaliation from her dad. After Rexall's comment, Jade fires back with an insult of her own, and Tab gets up to confront her. He says that if this were 200 years ago, then he could truly punish her in the way that a father is supposed to. She tries to punch him in the face, but he catches her fist, and then she knees him in the balls and he keels over, giving her just enough time to sprint out of the house. It's a cold night and all she has on her are the coveralls she's wearing and a razor blade, and she starts to think about the final girl from Friday the 13th, Alice. I should probably explain some slasher lingo if you aren't super familiar with that genre in particular. The final girl is the last survivor of any given slasher movie that ends up stopping the killer typically. This character is almost always a girl and is also almost always a virgin. A lot of old slasher movies use the same trope of horny teenagers being punished for their promiscuity by the killer. The final girl is typically seen as pure, and that's why she ends up surviving the entire massacre. It's not a hard and fast rule, but almost all of the OG slasher movies follow this same formula. Jade is obsessed with slashers to a degree that borders on unhealthy, not because being obsessed with horror is a bad thing, it isn't, but because she romanticizes the idea of being caught up in a massacre that tears through her hometown. She sees it as some sort of karmic justice for her less than ideal life. She decides that she's going to sit on the dock of Indian Lake and let herself freeze to death. She figures she'll be found before she actually dies, but that this act will be a statement to all the people in Proof Rock that have done her wrong. Her parents, Rexall, Sheriff Hardy, her history teacher, and pretty much everyone else in town. She gets distracted by a small fire, however, and drifts over to it to find 3 construction workers burning some trash. They're there to start building a new development across the lake called Terra Nova that's going to be filled with the ultra-rich as some sort of like mountain retreat. She, along with many of the citizens of Proof Rock, disapproves of this new development. She walks up to the construction workers and figures that since she's in coveralls, she's one of them. She gives the 3 men around the fire mental nicknames to match what they're wearing: shooting glasses, mismatched gloves, and cowboy boots. Shooting Glasses mentions that they're kind of mourning the death of their friend, Grayson Brust. Jade says it's a great name for a slasher and that it fits right in with Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Harry Warden, Victor Crowley, and a bunch of other names. Shooting Glasses asks her if she's alright, and he notices that she has a cut on her from the razor she's been keeping in her pocket, and he also sees that she has scars all over her thighs and hips from self-harm. She deflects and starts to say that her coveralls make her the janitor of this area, which makes her Cropsy, a famous slasher. She starts to explain that if she's Cropsy, it means she'll get horribly burned and then come back with the scissors and hedge trimmers and kill the campers that disrespect the camp that she used to work at. The workers try to cut her off and start to ask if she needs help or needs a ride back to her home, and they seem genuinely concerned for her. She keeps deflecting and starts to get emotional describing this slasher movie in detail. Shooting Glasses offers her a ride home and she passively accepts. In the car, Shooting Glasses tries to get to know her. She asks where he got his car from, and he says that they just found it on the shore of the lake a couple days ago, and no one has come back for it, so they're just kind of using it as their own. This is the rental car that the couple from the first chapter of the story were driving. Their bodies still haven't been found, so the workers don't know what to make of the car. They don't know it's related to any sort of tragedy at this point. Shooting Glasses asks Jade where she needs to be taken to and calls her the final girl. She rejects this label immediately and says that she can't be final girl because they are ambitious and pure, and she isn't either of those two things. He tries to ask her about her scars, and she keeps talking about slashers. She won't engage in any deeper of a conversation with him. He asks if she needs someplace to stay, if things are alright at home, and she starts to feel uncomfortable because it seems like he genuinely cares about her well-being. He asks her if she's using the whole slasher thing as sort of a coping mechanism or a way of protecting herself from her emotions. She can't handle it anymore, and she jumps out of the moving car. She runs to the town pier and jumps off it into the town canoe that's always there, the one that the couple from the beginning of the story used. She hides in it so Shooting Glasses can't see her when he looks out over the pier, and she curls up in the canoe and starts to cry. She thinks that she hates her life, she hates herself, she hates her parents, and everyone else who seems to show concern for her. She pushes the canoe out onto the lake and starts to think about the final scene in Friday the 13th, where Jason jumps up from the water and grabs the final girl. She wishes that a slasher would come to Proof Rock and punish all of the people that she despises, but she knows that Jason at the end of Friday the 13th was really just a scared boy. He was drowning and needed help, and someone should have saved him. She would have saved him if she was there. Now a good distance away from the shore, her body shivering, her lips blue, her face numb, she opens the utility knife and prays that Jason will come up from the water and take her away. She cuts her wrist and starts to pass out as the blood drains from her body. As she looks into the lake, she thinks she can see a smiling face looking up at her. After this, we get our first insert of Jade's Slasher 101 essays that she wrote for her high school English teacher, Mr. Holmes, for extra credit. Each of these short inserts come between each chapter of the book, and they all explain different elements of slasher movies. The first one covers the motives of a slasher. Jade says that every slasher is motivated by revenge. They're there to right the wrongs that were perpetrated against them however many years ago before the story starts. I really like these inserts. I think they're a good way for readers who may not be incredibly familiar with the slasher genre to make some sort of sense out of what Jade is saying. Despite Jade's less than stellar grades, her writing is enthusiastic and engaging. I imagine that any English teacher would be excited to get such passionate work turned in, even if the subject matter is kind of out there. We then skip to 8 weeks later. Jade has been through some sort of rehab or institutionalization following her suicide attempt and is being dropped off at her high school by Sheriff Hardy. He was called by Shooting Glasses, who saw Jade in the canoe out in the water. Jade has been given 12 hours of community service for unauthorized use of the town canoe. Sheriff Hardy asks her if she has any weapons on her, and she says that all of her weapons are buried beneath cabin 6 at Camp Blood, which we'll talk about in a bit. He gives her a heavy manila envelope with her belongings that were found on her the night that Sheriff Hardy rushed her to the hospital. She gets out of the car and walks into the high school. Her wrist is wrapped up in gauze, but we learn that it's been stitched up and that the gauze isn't necessary. Jade stole the gauze and is hiding her scar for personal reasons. She potentially is ashamed of her actions. She opens the envelope to find her earrings, her name patch from her custodial coveralls that she was wearing, and a phone in a pink case that she doesn't recognize. She finds a note on the back of the phone that says, "If found, call Sven." This is Lot's phone from the first chapter of the book. The paramedics found it in the canoe and assumed it was Jade's. She goes to the bathroom and starts to put on thick black eyeliner. She seems to view this as some sort of armor. Then she hears the toilet flush behind her and someone exits the stall. It's a girl Jade hasn't seen before. She's almost 6 feet tall, has flawless skin, gorgeous hair, and Jade describes her as being almost angelic in the way that she carries herself. She also notes that this girl is black. It doesn't come up a ton of the story, but it should be mentioned that rural, small-town Idaho isn't exactly known for its diversity. So this new girl stands out not only for her beauty, but because she is the only black girl in the entire high school. She introduces herself to Jade as Letha Mondragon. She says that she and her family are currently building their new home in Terra Nova. She's the first of the rich transplants that are coming to inhabit Proof Rock. Jade is stunned. Letha is polite to Jade and seems to treat her with genuine interest. Jade doesn't know how to react and just waits for Letha to leave. She starts crying and smiling because she knows that she's finally found the final girl in this slasher story. Jade's desire for a slasher to come to Proof Rock is something that is brought up over and over again. She sees the appearance of Letha as the final girl as a sign that this is all really happening. The next insert from Jade's extra credit essays has her describing what a final girl is. She says they are pure, have cool names, and inspire hope around those around them. This all seems to make Letha an even more perfect fit for the role. We then get a scene in Mr. Holmes' history class where he's showing a video that he recorded on his ultralight aircraft, which is kind of like a tiny airplane that you don't need a license to fly. Mr. Holmes shows them footage that he got of a group of around 12 elk that have all been killed, their necks snapped. Some kids look away and Letha asks what's killed them. Banner Tompkins, the stereotypical jock, says that it must have been a grizzly bear. Mr. Holmes says that he isn't quite sure and rolls the footage again. The class notices an attractive blonde woman sunbathing on the docks of Terra Nova. Banner asks Letha if it's her sister and she says that it's her stepmother, Tiara. Jade thinks that this must be the tragic backstory that all final girls have. Letha's resentment towards her stepmother must be bubbling up inside of her. Mr. Holmes plays the end of the video and Jade spots a cigarette in his hand. She also smokes, but she knows that Mr. Holmes has promised his wife that he had quit, and now he uses the ultralight as a way of sneaking cigarettes. After school, Jade goes to the elementary school custodial office to pick up a new pair of coveralls. She tries a bunch of combinations to get Lot's phone to unlock, but nothing works. Rexall enters the room behind her and asks her if she wants help. He says that he can get rid of the password on his computer if she shows him a little something. Jade says that Rexall should just do it for free or she'll rat him out for soliciting sexual favors from a minor. He unlocks the phone and Jade finds the video of the lake. She sees the two Dutch students disappear and she knows that this is a sign that there is a slasher in town. She starts walking on the sidewalk but is bumped into by two elementary school kids, dropping the phone into the street. One of the elementary schoolers apologizes and goes to retrieve the phone, and Jade quickly pulls her back from the incoming bus that would have ran her over. It destroys the phone. A nearby adult, Misty Christie, hugs her child and calls Jade a hero. Jade thinks that she wasn't really trying to save the kid, and that her wishing for a slasher is kind of the opposite of being a hero. The next insert has Jade describing more essential elements in a slasher story. She says there needs to be an initial blood sacrifice with the killer's iconic weapon. She also says that it's essential that the killing spree happens in one night or in a very short amount of time, because the adults also need to not believe the kids when they try to explain to them that there's a murderer on the loose. Our next chapter starts with Jade's graduation. The graduating class of Proof Rock is just 32 kids, and Jade technically hasn't earned her diploma as she needs to make up some work for Mr. Holmes. In the crowd are the new families of Terra Nova, who have now taken to calling themselves the Founders. I won't go over all of them right now. I'll get into some of them when they're more important to the story, but it's not really essential to know like all of their character names and who they are and what they do specifically. I'll just point out Letha's dad, Theo Mondragon, is there with his wife Tiara. Theo is some sort of media mogul, which is how he is rich enough to live in Terra Nova in the first place. Rexall, the pervy janitor, is on stage as well in a suit. It turns out that Misty Christie, the mother of the daughter that Jade saved, told the superintendent that a brave janitor saved her kid, and they just assumed it was Rexall. Jade isn't particularly bothered by this. She doesn't like the spotlight being on her at all. She spots her mom, Jade Daniels, in the back of the crowd. Kimmy and Jade no longer talk. She works at the Family Dollar, and Jade will often go there to get her hair dye. Kimmy just rings her items up every time without saying a word to her. Suspiciously, Kimmy never seems to collect any payment from Jade. She just lets her take everything that she wants and pays for it herself. Kind of a way of maybe trying to make up for not being there for her, but that's not really enough. Mr. Holmes, the history teacher, is retiring this year, so he's invited by Principal Manx to give a speech. He gives a short speech that is pretty much a big middle finger to the founders of Terra Nova. After this, the principal invites Rexall up to be applauded for his heroic actions, but Misty Christie yells out that it was Jade that saved the girl, and the whole crowd starts cheering her on. Jade is embarrassed by this, even more so when her dad appears with two metal trash can lids and starts banging them together like cymbals. Jade starts to scan the crowd and sees that the construction workers are there, so she starts looking for shooting glasses. She spots him applauding her, and he seems to be making eye contact with her. She feels attached to him, but feels dumb for thinking that he might actually be into her. Letha reaches out to her and asks her if she's alright. Jade is shocked by her genuine kindness and concern. She leaves the ceremony and throws her graduation cap in the trash. Our next insert is a pretty big lore dump. Jade is describing an interview project that she was assigned where she interviewed Christine Gillette, an old woman at the local nursing home. Christine tells Jade about Stacy Graves, the lake witch. Supposedly, Stacy Graves was a young Native American girl that drowned in the lake over 100 years ago. Indian Lake is interesting because underneath it is the remains of an old mining town, which is now referred to by the locals as Drown Town. This has led to some urban legends about the famous preacher Ezekiel. Supposedly, he and the other residents of Drown Town still haunt the flooded town to this day. Anybody who goes missing around Indian Lake is said to have been taken to the depths of Drown Town to the church where Ezekiel and his unholy choir sing their profane song. Stacy Graves was a young girl who drowned in the lake whose body wasn't found until years later when a man attempted to use a large hook on a chain to pull something out of the water. He attached the chain to his truck and pulled up Stacy Graves, the hook kind of embedded in her jaw, pulling the skin off and almost certainly snapping the bone. But then Stacy pulled herself off of the hook and started to run around like a zombie of some sort. This story became an urban legend, and almost everyone who remembers it is dead now. We also get a rhyme created about Stacy Graves that the little girls used to sing when they would jump rope. Stacy, Stacy, Stacy Graves, born to put you in your grave. You see her in the dark of night, and once you do, you're lost from sight. Look for water, look for blood, look for footprints in the mud. You never see her walk on grass. Don't slow down, she'll get your... Christine Gillette decides not to finish this obvious rhyme, and Jade says this whole story is proof that the Lake Witch is real and that she's coming for all of Proof Rock. At least, she hopes she is. The next chapter sees Jade stabbing trash with her litter stick and imagining her taking her dad's eyes out with it. She is making her way to the sheriff's station because she knows that she has to start her community service there. She can see the sheriff on the water in his little motorboat, and she remembers that he used to teach all of the kids about safety precautions to take when swimming in the lake. Sheriff Hardy's daughter, Melanie, died by drowning in the lake when she was a teenager. She was there with Clayt Rogers, Rexall, and Jade's parents, but no one went out to save her. Jade looks across the water to the yacht that Theo Mondragon and his family have been staying in while their house is being built. She starts to think about Letha's tragic backstory and what it could be. She settles on Letha being abused by her dad, that he was someone she was supposed to trust, but that he abused this trust, and Jade thinks that that is more than enough motivation to be the final girl in this story. She sees Banner Tompkins and his friends in a Jeep. They invite Letha to a party that night on the lake, and Jade ends up following them in order to spy on them. She starts thinking that Theo Mondragon could potentially be the slasher in this story, that his good looks and pristine style are just masking his murderous tendencies. Jade is hiding in the trees, watching the party in her coveralls and a Michael Myers mask. She sees that the teenagers are watching a movie and drinking, and then she spots something in the water. It's a body. There's a body floating in the lake, but Jade doesn't seem to recognize the body in the water. Letha walks out of the house and sees it as well, and Jade wants to tell her not to approach it, that Theo could be using this as a trap. Letha rushes out to the body to find the blonde Dutch boy from the beginning of the story. His lower jaw has been ripped off, and Letha calls for help while Jade starts laughing from pure excitement. She walks away from the house and starts crying. First we have the blood sacrifice, now we have our final girl. Jade Daniels is living in a real-life slasher movie. The next insert is a short letter written to Letha from Jade. She has enclosed a VHS copy of The Bay of Blood and tells Letha to study it so she can learn what's coming for Proof Rock. She says that the slasher is on the loose and is likely to show up on the 4th of July in order to turn Proof Rock into a Bay of Blood. She leaves her number in case Letha has any more questions. Now, stepping away from the fact that this is a fictional story, you can imagine how alarming this would be in real life. You have an outsider girl telling another girl to be ready for a massacre. I think most people would assume that Jade knows something about a sinister plot to enact a massacre, but the reality is that she just believes she's living in a slasher movie and she knows all the tropes. That's one thing that I really love about this series. Stephen Graham Jones uses a lot of classic slasher tropes, and we'll talk about them in a way that never feels too meta. All of these tropes that Jade sees feel more like stretches that she is making to conform to her wish for a slasher in Proof Rock, rather than actual evidence that she is living in a slasher movie. The next chapter starts with Jade leaving the town library after having snuck in after hours to print off her collection of slasher essays. She's caught by Sheriff Hardy. He is typically sitting on a bench by the lake and smoking a cigarette at night, and Jade forgot that he would be nearby. He takes a look at her work before returning it to her. He says that she can start her community service tomorrow and that she'll be helping him at the sheriff's office. He says he won't tell anyone about her stealing toner and ink from the library. This is our first look at the true dynamic of most of the adults in Proof Rock. They're actually quite charitable towards Jade. She thinks that they hate her, but this is just a projection of her own lack of self-worth. I mean, the fact that Mr. Holmes will even take her slasher essays as extra credit in an Idaho State history class is pretty remarkable, and Sheriff Hardy seems to care for her to a pretty strong degree. Sheriff Hardy drops her back to her house, and she goes to collect her essays and the Bay of Blood videotape for Letha. She leaves to deliver them to the yacht, but sees that it isn't in its usual spot. She spots Sheriff Hardy headed over to them with his motorboat and can see that Letha is being consoled by her stepmom and dad. Someone else must have died. She heads back to her house, not wanting to give the slasher essays to Letha in person, and finds her dad, who tells her about how he used to go water skiing behind the sheriff's boat. He says that he and his friends used to tie a rope to the boat and hide under the dock until the sheriff took his boat out, and then they would get themselves a free ride, kind of like a water skiing thing. Jade thinks to herself about her dad and mom taking a trip to the infamous Camp Blood, the site of a tragedy from decades ago. Jade was conceived in one of these abandoned cabins. This, of course, is something that fuels Jade's obsession with the slasher genre. She was conceived at the site of a massacre, so she feels that it's her destiny to witness one. Her dad tells her that the rope they used to water ski behind the sheriff's boat was about 70 feet, and that's about as far away as you want to be from the law at all times. Jade asks if this is about her being dropped off by Sheriff Hardy last night. Her dad says that if the sheriff shows up at their house one more time, then he's kicking her out. He tells her that one of the founders has died and he doesn't want to be a suspect. Jade goes to her room and attempts to dye her hair with shoe polish, which turns it into a greasy, sticky mess. I should say that she's been dyeing her hair for pretty much the entire story. I don't think that knowing the particular color of her hair is essential to her character, but it is something that she seems to do very messily and almost compulsively. She looks online to see that one of the founders has died, but there isn't any more information on who it was or how it happened. She decides she's going to help at the sheriff's office tonight. The next insert fills us in on the Camp Blood lore that we've been missing. This essay is an interview with Sheriff Hardy, who was a camp counselor at Lake Winnemucca, which is now Camp Blood. He says that the camp was rumored to be cursed from the start, that when they were building it, they saw a group of Native Americans looking at them from across the lake. This was actually how the lake changed its name from being Glen Lake to now being named Indian Lake. Hardy says that there were 4 teenagers that died at the camp that week. One of them turned up dead pretty early on in the week. He had drowned in the water, with a beehive being found in place of his mouth when his body resurfaced. Notably, it seemed like his lower jaw had been torn off. Later that week, another teenager turned up dead, having been suspected of falling down a rock face that he was trying to climb. The next girl to die was found in a big cooking pot, which was rumored to be a dare gone wrong. The final victim was the dam keeper's daughter, who was found being eaten by another camper, Amy Brockmere. Amy seemed to have gone crazy and was subdued and then institutionalized. No one knows what provoked her to kill her fellow campmate, but the loss of his daughter led the dam keeper to raise the water in the lake in order to flood the entire town of Proof Rock. It almost ended up destroying the town, but the dam keeper was killed by the sheriff at the time, who shot at him from a distance through the windows of the dam keeper's control office. The last part of this interview has Sheriff Hardy saying that the name of the dam keeper's daughter was Melanie, which is the same name that he would later give to his daughter. Jade heads to the police station that is buzzing from the death of one of the founders. She is tasked with stuffing envelopes by Meg, the office secretary. Jade tries to get more information about what is going on from Meg, but she isn't budging. She is very skeptical of Jade and is keeping a close eye on her. The sheriff comes in to tell Meg that the state detectives have arrived and that they'll all be very busy. Jade asks to go to the bathroom, and Meg escorts her there. While she's inside, the sheriff tells Meg to come into his office for something urgent. Jade leaves the bathroom and uses this time to take a look at Meg's computer. She finds a recording device that Sheriff Hardy uses, and she takes the audio file from it and emails it to herself. She puts everything back in place before pretending to be asleep on the desk. Meg returns and excuses Jade for the night. She leaves and runs into Banner Tompkins and a whole group of hunters headed into the woods. She isn't sure why they're doing this, and they don't explain. She heads over to Letha's house and leaves the package of slasher movies and her essays for her, along with her phone number. She heads back to the other side of the lake. Jade pulls up the audio recording on her phone and starts to listen to it. Sheriff Hardy explains that one of the founders, Deacon Samuels, has just been killed. He says that Samuels used to sit on the shore of the lake and dunk his golf balls in gasoline before lighting them and hitting them high into the sky over the lake. Jade thinks that it's a miracle that he never took down Mr. Holmes and his ultralight aircraft. Last night, however, the golf balls stopped flying and Letha Mondragon went to investigate. She was with 2 of the founders' kids, Cinnamon and Ginger Baker. Letha told them to stay back and found Deacon Samuels having been mauled by a bear. Sheriff Hardy says that they couldn't even carry him back in a body bag because he had been absolutely demolished by this bear, and they found some baked goods in his golf bag. So the running theory is that Deacon Samuels inadvertently baited a rogue bear who killed him on the lake that night. That's what Banner Tompkins and the others are going to hunt. Jade listens to the entire recording and then gets a call from an unknown number. She answers it and it's Letha. She says that she got the package and Jade tells her that she needs to get ready. Letha says that the candle that Deacon Samuels used to light his golf balls up was pinched out. It didn't burn down to the end of the wick, which means someone else was there. Jade says they need to meet in person and Letha suggests that they meet somewhere public. They decide to meet at noon on the bench that Sheriff Hardy always smokes on at night, the Melanie Hardy Memorial Bench. The next insert has Jade explaining to Mr. Holmes that all of the killers in slasher movies wear some sort of disguise that prevents you from seeing who they really are. And when a killer isn't wearing a disguise, their kills are almost always done from their point of view, so we as the audience are unable to find out who the true identity of the slasher is. The next day, Jade is scrubbing the toilets in the high school for her custodial job and wondering if the preacher, Ezekiel, is the slasher in town. She says that the vengeful preachers aren't really common, though. Since he and his church drowned all those years ago when the town was flooded, that sort of makes the lake into a graveyard, but it's more of a Christian burial ground and not an Indian burial ground. Jade heads to the lake and finds Letha on the beach. Letha tells her that she read her letters over and over again, and she asks her why she's so fascinated by Stacy Graves. She says that she was reading between the lines and it made her cry, that she knows why she came to Prufrock. It was to help Jade. Jade is confused and says that she's the one there to help Letha. She says that she can guide Letha through her final girl responsibilities, and Letha tells her not to hate her for what she's done. And then Sheriff Hardy and Mr. Holmes pull up to the two of them. Jade is outraged that Letha told them about her slasher essays and says that the police and adults never help in slasher movies. She asks if this is about her stealing the toner from the library and says that she can pay it back. Sheriff Hardy tells her that the librarian has known for years that Jade prints her assignments out there and that she doesn't really mind. They say they're there to help her, not get her in trouble. She says that it couldn't be a local doctor, and Jade says her mom took her to a convenience store while getting some news from the doctor about will she, won't she. We learn that Letha, Sheriff Hardy, and Mr. Holmes all suspect that Jade has been sexually abused by her father, that all of this slasher obsession stems from that trauma. Jade is completely caught off guard by this and vehemently denies it. Mr. Holmes asks what will she or won't she meant, and Jade says her mom was debating leaving her loser of a husband. Jade says that they can go ask her mom themselves if they want to, and they decide to go do that. Letha says that the hospitals have tests, and Jade cuts her off saying that testing to see if she is a virgin is useless. She says that everyone knows that the goth custodian with a different hair color each week wouldn't be able to keep her legs closed. Letha counters this by saying Jade has never had a boyfriend, but Jade says that maybe she's just not into boys. They head to the Family Dollar to find Jade's mom, and Jade decides that a slasher should come and kill everyone in Prufrock, but that Letha doesn't deserve it. She thinks that even though Letha is way off base about this whole thing, she does seem to truly want to help Jade. She just can't see that she is the one who really needs the help. They arrive at the Family Dollar and Sheriff Hardy goes inside. Jade pulls out a cigarette and offers it to Mr. Holmes. She says that he's not a teacher anymore and she's not a student. Mr. Holmes tells Jade that he used to go around with his friends when he was a teenager on a raft that they had built out in Indian Lake, and they'd pretend to be pirates. He says that Sheriff Hardy was one of his buddies back then and confesses that they were the ones that accidentally started a forest fire that almost burned down all of Idaho. The way this fire was stopped was by raising the water level in the lake and almost flooding all of Prufrock, but it ended up saving the town and the rest of the state from being burnt down. Mr. Holmes asked Jade to tell him what she was referring to when she said her mom was on the phone asking will she or won't she, but Jade refuses to answer. Mr. Holmes says that while Jade is obsessed with slashers, she seems to avoid any of the movies about revenge after sexual assault, and she says that they're not really slashers. Sheriff Hardy comes out of the Family Dollar and says that Jade's mom told him that the reason they were at the doctor's office when she was 11 years old was to get her stomach pumped. Jade tells him that she was embarrassed by this, but that she wasn't lying when she said that she'd never been assaulted. She says the real problem is the slasher on the prowl, the one that killed Deacon Samuels. Sheriff Hardy says that he'll take Jade home. Lisa says that this isn't over and that she knows Jade is hiding the truth about her abuse. Jade thanks Letha for her concern, but says it's unfounded. While Hardy drives Jade home, he asks her how she knows about Deacon Samuel's death. He says that he knows that she swiped his audio files, and she says that he can't prove it. He asks her about how she knew about the body that Letha found at the party, and Jade says that she was at the party that night. Hardy says they talked to everyone there, and they never saw her. Jade says that maybe she's just making it all up. She's watched too many horror movies and is just making lucky guesses due to that. Either way, she says Hardy needs to have extra security on the 4th of July. He tells her that she won't be allowed to attend the annual lake party, and she gets really upset at this. She says that she's been waiting her whole life for this, but he isn't having any of it. She has him drop her off at the school to continue her custodial shift. She goes into the women's bathroom and carves the Lake Witch slayings into the stall. She says that that's what they'll be calling it when the slasher arrives for the 4th of July massacre. The next insert is Jade's essay on the big reveal that each slasher movie has. There's always a moment when we discover who the killer is and why they're on a rampage. She says that most slasher movies also have a red herring and that you always need to be on the lookout for that. These are all good lessons to keep in mind going forward. Jade goes back home and makes herself a sandwich with her dad's fancy mustard that only he can use. She's in her underwear and knows that she'll be home alone since her dad is working across the lake at Terra Nova. We learn that she's been fired from her job as a custodian because of the graffiti she scratched into the wall. She sits in the kitchen, but hears her dad and Rexall approaching. But it turns out her dad isn't with Rexall, he's with Clayt Rogers. Clayt was a childhood friend of her dad, and the one who was Sheriff Hardy's daughter's boyfriend. He was there when she drowned. Clayt doesn't live in Proof Rock anymore since Hardy became the sheriff. Sheriff Hardy still holds him responsible for his daughter's death and hates him to this day. She panics when they enter the house and knows that she has to hide from them. She walks out the back door of their double wide and ducks out of sight when her dad opens the back door himself a couple seconds later. She rushes over to the school Lost and Found to find some clothes and starts walking to Camp Blood. She finds the staging area where the Terra Nova construction workers keep their equipment. I didn't explain it earlier, but Terra Nova is only accessible by boats. They have barges that carry the equipment over to the other side of the lake, but you can't drive there. The only way to get there by foot is to either walk the long way through the woods or walk along the ridge of the dam, which is dangerous, but Jade has done it several times. Jade goes to the staging area, hoping to catch a glimpse of what the slasher's weapon will be for the 4th of July massacre. She tries to open the shed when someone walks up behind her. It's Shooting Glasses, the guy from the beginning of the story whose car she jumped out of. He asks her what she's looking for, and she asks if this is where they keep the explosives. He asks her who she's trying to kill this time around, and she says, everybody. He says that he's never talked to anyone like her, and she asks if they're done building Terra Nova yet. Shooting Glasses says that they've run into foundation issues. The ground has old mine shafts and caves, and they need to fill them in concrete in order to build solid foundations. He says that one of the founders, Mars Baker, is going to bring a remote-controlled submarine to take a look at the flooded town at the bottom of the lake, and Jade says that she could probably like Shooting Glasses. She thinks he could be someone that she could talk to, and Shooting Glasses agrees. She asks for him to tell her more about the caves in Terra Nova. She says that she'll tell him why she tried to end her life that night on the lake, and he says that that's her business, but she wants to trade this information for more information about the caves. Shooting Glasses agrees, and he says that Deacon Samuels had paid him and his 2 co-workers to write a false report about what happened to their friend, Grayson Brust. Grayson had fallen into one of the caves they unearthed while trying to level the ground for the foundation. When they pulled him out, he was acting like a rabid animal. He had gone completely insane and was running around on all fours. Deacon Samuels put him in the assisted living home nearby, and he died a month later. Jade wonders if the spirit of Grayson Brust could be the slasher that is killing people around town. She tells Shooting Glasses that she didn't really want to die that day in the lake. She says that she wanted to be part of a movie, that she was waiting for Jason to pull her into the lake. Her reasoning doesn't make sense, but it's also not supposed to. It's now dark, and both Jade and Shooting Glasses hear a loud scream. They look over into the lake and see a motorboat owned by one of the founders in the water. There's a rope behind the boat, and Jade realizes what has happened. Her dad and his friends have done what they used to do. Try to water ski behind an unsuspecting boat. Clayt Rogers tried to ski behind the founder's boat, but they stopped too soon, and the propeller sliced him up into a mess of human gore. Letha looks on in horror. Jade looks over and sees Sheriff Hardy smoking a cigarette on his usual bench. He would have been able to see Clayt Rogers sneaking under the dock to go water skiing. She realizes that Hardy must have known this was going to happen but didn't stop it, and in a way, he sort of got revenge on the man who could have saved his daughter all those years ago. The next insert goes over red herrings. There's nothing too important here. It just explains the concept of thinking you found the obvious killer, only for the true killer to be revealed in the twist. Jade goes back home to find her dad and Rexall passed out. She thinks that she could get the machete hidden in her room and finally kill her dad like she's imagined it doing over and over again. But she decides against it and starts to think about who the true slasher could be. She thinks that it could be Theo Mondragon. His house is the one that was built over the cave that Grayson Brust fell into, which means that in that case he could have been wronged, which makes him a good candidate for a slasher, and she thinks this makes sense and knows that she needs to provide Letha with a weapon to defend herself with. She starts to head back to the lake with her machete and sees Letha on the shore. There was a large inflatable screen that has been put up for the 4th of July movie party at the lake. 2 of the founders are getting a video ready that they're playing up on the screen right now in memory of Deacon Samuels. It's going to be the celebration of his life since he was the one who started Terra Nova. Jade sees Letha on the shore wearing her sunglasses, and she starts to think about the founders and how they're just trying to leech the town dry for everything it has. The video on the screen changes, and the founders start to talk about how much they love Proof Rock, that they don't want to be separated from its citizens and they want to all live together. Jade starts to see that these founders seem to actually appreciate Proof Rock, but can't accept this since it goes against everything she believes about them. They announce a scholarship fund for every student graduating from the high school from now on. They'll pay for all of their college expenses no matter where they go. This catches Jade off guard. She's completely conflicted about this generous offer they want to present to the town on the 4th of July. She can't handle these emotions. She starts to think that if she's wrong about the founders, maybe she's wrong about the other people in her life. Her parents, her teacher, Sheriff Hardy. She starts to hit the trees with her machete. As she's doing this, Sheriff Hardy shines his headlights on her. She panics and thinks that she needs to get rid of the machete, and she starts running away from him, and he tells her to wait. She runs towards the docks and sees Letha. She thinks that she needs to give this weapon to the perfect final girl, so Jade hurls the machete directly at Letha's chest. Mars Baker is sitting next to her and can only watch as the machete flies through the air. Letha twists around and catches it perfectly using her final girl instincts. Jade watches this in amazement, and then she is tackled to the ground by Sheriff Hardy. I really like making these videos, but it can be hard sometimes to express what exactly is going on in a character's head in like the summary format. This is a great example of this issue. Jade is clearly struggling with a lot of conflicting emotions, and these emotions often explode into reckless decisions. Throwing a machete at Letha is one of those terrible decisions. Even if she says that she was just trying to provide Letha a weapon to protect herself, it's still hard to believe her. She has already shown herself to be a volatile person, and Letha did recently try to expose her. I fully thought that Jade was going to kill Letha here on accident, but I'm glad that she survives this encounter because it would have been a completely different story if it hadn't. The next insert describes how final girls turn into their self-assured, ruthless selves after they find the bodies of their friends that have been killed by the slasher. Another interesting note in this insert is that Jade mentions that final girls never puke when they encounter a body. Jane is known to be prone to puking in stressful situations and when she sees gross stuff. This all goes to further cement her belief that she could never be the final girl. She seems almost hostile towards that idea. It makes her very uncomfortable. It's just an interesting detail that I noticed. The next chapter sees Jade in a jail cell in the sheriff's office. Hardy says that she isn't 18 yet, so he's not going to throw her in real jail, but he just wants to keep her safe. The two of them talk about slashers, and Jade swears she wasn't trying to hurt Letha. He asks her if her dad ever hits her or abuses her in any way, and she says no. He says that he wants to keep her in the cell until after the 4th of July. He's worried about what she's alluded to with the Lake Witch slayings. She says that there is a massacre coming and that she should be there to help. Hardy seems to legitimately care for her, but he can't let her go. She asks to go to the bathroom. Hardy takes her to the front of the office, and she looks out the window to see Mr. Holmes' ultralight barreling towards the surface of the lake before violently crashing. She screams, and Hardy sprints out to go get Mr. Holmes. Meg, the secretary, returns and says that she needs to put Jade back in her cell, and Jade says that she still needs to go to the bathroom. Meg lets her go because she needs to call emergency services, and Jade goes to the bathroom and climbs out of the broken window, crashing into the trees below. She stands near the shore of the lake, watching to see if Mr. Holmes is all right. She says that he can't be dead, that this isn't part of the slasher story, that he doesn't deserve this. She notices a shadow over to her left and looks around to see a bear cub. She tells the bear to go and find his mom. She says there's a scary killer bear on the loose and that his mom should be protecting him. She realizes that she's essentially a fugitive at this point and goes back to the construction staging area and finds a shed to hide and sleep in for the night. She pulls a dirty tarp with cobwebs on it over herself and goes to sleep. No one finds her there and she sleeps through the night. She wakes up in the morning and starts to form a plan. She's convinced that the slasher is the one who shot down Mr. Holmes and needs to warn Letha about him. She's convinced that Thea Mondragon is the killer at this point. The only issue with this plan is that her phone is dead and she can't go back home because Hardy will certainly be looking for her there, so she decides to head to Terra Nova on foot. Not wanting to take the long way around, she walks across the dam and almost gets caught by the operator in the control booth. She makes it to the other side, to Terra Nova. She starts to look through the mansions that are in the middle of construction. She enters one of the large houses and hears a loud clack sound. It's the sound of a nail gun. She ducks down and looks over to see someone in a gas mask and a golf cap carrying a nail gun. They're heading for the yacht that Letha and the other founders are on. She knows that she can't yell out to the people on the yacht because it'll give her away. She runs into one of the empty houses and tries to plug her phone in, but there's no electricity. She remembers that shooting glasses mentioned that only the basements have been hooked up at this point, and she decides to head down there knowing that this is a dumb idea. The lights are on in the basement and she sees a room across from her. She also sees blood on the floor. She walks into the bathroom to find a construction worker dead in the tub. She recognizes him as Cowboy Boots, one of the workers she met at the beginning of the story. He has a single nail in his forehead right between his eyes. Jade turns around to see that the lights in the main room of the basement have been turned off. She panics and takes a step into the darkness, only for the lights to turn back on. She realizes that they're just motion activated. She rushes upstairs and looks out the window to see shooting glasses jumping out of the window of the next house over. He's being pursued by the masked killer with the nail gun. The killer shoots his nails at shooting glasses, who avoids them and jumps into the lake next to the yacht. The killer unloads his nail cartridge into the water and throws the gun to hide the evidence. After this, Letha looks out over the rail of the yacht at the killer. She tells him to be quiet, that Tiara is sleeping. The The killer pulls off his mask, and it's Theo Mondragon. Letha asks her if he got all of them, and he says that he thinks he did. We learn that Letha is talking about wasps. She thinks her dad is just clearing the wasps out, not killing the construction workers. Jade tries to make sense of this. Theo Mondragon is killing the construction workers, but he doesn't seem to have any reason to. They haven't done anything to deserve this. She thinks that Theo could be trying to hide any evidence that the foundation of his house was built over those historic caverns that they found, because that would maybe make the construction illegal. But she also knows that Theo has never liked Mr. Holmes' ultralight aircraft, that he thought he was spying on his suntanning wife. And Jade figures he must have shot his aircraft down with the nail gun. She looks at the lake, waiting for shooting glasses' body to bob up from the water, but it doesn't. And she thinks that it's probably because he's nailed to the bottom of the lake. The next insert is about how Jade thinks that every slasher movie is really just about the final girl, that all of the violence is done because the slasher knows that they'll need to face off against them. She thinks that the slasher can recognize who the final girl will be, and the violence is just a bloody dance between the two of them, that the slasher wears a mask to hide his smile. We go back to Jade. She's found a working outlet and recharged her phone, but she doesn't have any cell reception. She ducks down when she sees Theo Mondragon again. He's pulling another one of the construction workers, Cowboy Boots, out of a house. He's dead. Theo has wrapped him in plastic, but Jade can see the nails sticking out of his back. He looks at his phone, but it also seems like he doesn't have any cell reception. Jade retreats deeper into the house that she's staying in. Theo now out of sight, and she starts to think about Letha. She thinks it's perfect that the slasher is the final girl's dad. It fits with all the slasher tropes she knows. She stands in the dark building and audibly says, "Sorry, Letha." Letha appears in the doorway and says, "Sorry for what?" Jade panics and says that she's sorry for trespassing, and Letha says that she's looking for the wild bear that killed Deacon Samuels. Letha says that Sheriff Hardy called, that he's looking for her and is worried about her. Jade reveals the VHS tape that she has with her, and it's another slasher movie she wants Letha to watch. Letha says that Hardy is truly worried about her and that they all just want to help her. She says that she doesn't need help, but she needs to show Letha this slasher movie to prepare her for what's coming. Letha says they don't have a VHS player on the yacht, and Jade realizes that she couldn't have watched the Bay of Blood tape she left with her. Letha invites her onto the yacht anyways. While walking back to the yacht, Letha says that her dad wished he had a BB gun to shoot Mr. Holmes' ultralight with, but that he'd never actually do it. Jade starts to put the picture together in her head. Theo must have shot down Mr. Holmes' ultralight with a nail gun while talking with the construction workers. He might not have thought he would have actually took it down though. Now, having committed a murder with 3 witnesses around, he starts to go on his nail gun rampage, killing the workers that could have turned him into the sheriff. I'll say now that we never get a confirmed answer as to why Theo killed the construction workers, but I think Jade is spot on here. It's the solution that makes the most logical sense. Also, because we're kind of in the weeds here already, I want to go back over all the deaths we've seen in the story so far so you can have all the pieces in your head. We're just heading for the final act of this story, so now is a good time to brush up on everything. The first 2 victims are the Dutch students. They were killed out on the lake, and the man was found by Letha with his jaw ripped off, but the woman hasn't been found yet. After that, we have Deacon Samuels, who was presumably killed by a bear that was attracted to the baked goods that he had in his golf bag. There might be something else going on there, but it's not important for the story in this book. We have Clayt Rogers, who was killed while trying to water ski behind one of the founders' boats. His death was, by all accounts, an accident, but Sheriff Hardy could have prevented it. Then we have Mr. Holmes being shot out of the sky by Theo Mondragon, who also killed the 3 construction workers, shooting glasses, cowboy boots, and mismatched gloves. As for the deaths that happened before the story started, we have the 4 dead teenagers at Camp Blood a few decades back. One of them was killed by a feral Amy Brockmere. The crazed state that she was in is similar to what happened to Grayson Brust after falling into one of the caves underneath Terra Nova. That will be very important in a later book in this series. We also have Stacy Graves, the little girl who drowned in the lake and was pulled out by the jaw by a truck with a hook hitched to it. She apparently came back to life and wandered off. Then we have Ezekiel the preacher and the rest of Drowned Town that died when the town flooded. Their bodies were never recovered and are presumably still in the church below. Back to the story, Jade is starving and can't resist Letha's invitation to stay with her and watch a movie on the yacht. They go to Letha's room, and Jade wants to watch the horror movie Christie. The issue is that it's not on any streaming services, so Letha calls her dad and asks if she can watch it, and it shows up on their screen immediately, because he owns all of the big networks. Letha says that Mars Baker, one of the other founders, must have turned off the cell reception jammer that he had installed to keep the construction workers off of their phones. Jade asks Letha where her dad is right now, and she says that she doesn't know, that he likes to work late some nights and check on the progress of their house. After a bit, Letha falls asleep, and Jade sneaks off to investigate the yacht for anything that might give Theo away. She finds some scuba gear and a spear gun below deck. She hears someone coming down the hall and runs into the bathroom. One of the Baker twins, either Cinnamon or Ginger, needs to go to the bathroom as well. Jade says that she'll be out in a second and sees some clippers by the sink. She thinks, why not, and shaves her head. She tries to wash the hair down the drain but can't get all of it. She leaves the bathroom and either Cinnamon or Ginger asks who she is, and she says that she's Letha's friend. The twin complains about the hair in the sink and Jade walks away. She goes back to Letha's room and uses her phone to quietly call the sheriff's station. Meg answers the phone and Jade tells her that she wants to leave an anonymous tip. She says that Theo Mondragon killed 3 people in Terra Nova and that she saw the whole thing. Meg knows that this is Jade and says that the sheriff left instructions for her. She says that the sheriff told her that Jade would try something to trick her and that she doesn't believe Jade at all. Jade is frustrated and hangs up the phone. Then the wall blasts open above her head. A shotgun blast, presumably from Mars Baker's shotgun, blows a hole through the wall. Letha wakes up and ducks to the ground. Another blast blows through the door. Letha is confused and Jade tells her that this is her moment, that the massacre is happening now, not on the 4th of July like she thought it would be, but the day before. Jade tells her that they need to find their way off of the yacht. They exit the room and find Lady Bird Samuels, Deacon's wife, dead. Her lower jaw has been ripped off. They find Ross Pangborn next. He has been completely ripped apart. Mars Baker has been thrown through the glass window and his body is also completely mangled. They make their way out into the lower deck and Letha thinks she sees her dad standing above them on the upper deck. T.R. Mondragon is thrown from the upper deck and impaled on a post near Letha and Jade. Jade says that they need to get off the boat, and she jumps into the cold water below. She resurfaces and looks up at Letha, telling her that she needs to jump, but Letha is staring up at the upper deck. Jade can see that there is someone with long hair looking down at Letha, and she knows that this is Theo Mondragon in a wig, trying to cosplay as the Lake Witch. She tells Letha to jump. Letha jumps into the water, and the two start to swim towards a clearing, Camp Blood. As Jade is swimming, she comes across another founder, Llewellyn Singleton, dead in the water, his face having been caved in. The two of them reach the shore and look over to see someone standing in the woods watching them. It's Theo Mondragon in the gas mask. Jade tells Letha to run. They sprint away and Jade steps in something that snaps shut over her leg. It's a bear trap. She and Letha manage to pull it off her leg and recock it in hopes that Theo will run into it. Leah says that they were worried that the killer bear would come back, so they put some bear traps out there. Jade's leg is bleeding and in pain, but the two of them keep moving. They run for a while and look back to see Theo Mondragon hot on their tail. At this point, Letha recognizes him and calls out for him. Jade tells her that he is the killer, but she doesn't believe her. She tells Letha to call out to him one more time. She does, and Theo starts moving towards them. He steps in the bear trap, though, and cries out in pain. Letha is angry that Jade used her to hurt her dad. Jade says that they can figure all of this out later, but that they need to hide from the killer that murdered everyone on that boat. Letha points to a pile of dead elk. She says that her dad had the construction workers pile them up after they were killed by the crazy bear, and it's their only viable hiding spot. They've been constructed as sort of a small hut, almost like a little hallway. Honestly, this section kind of reminds me of the end of The House That Jack Built. If you've ever seen that movie, it's like a very similar concept of like a weird structure built with dead bodies. Jade and Letha make their way inside the rotting, rancid huddle of elk gore, and it forms a kind of tunnel, like I said, and they hide at the back, and there are like maggots all over the place, and it smells horrible. It's just absolutely vile. Theo Mondragon starts to make his way to the elk pile, and he uses a flashlight to peer inside, but the tunnel is windy enough that he can't see them. He starts to gag and leaves, calling Letha's name. Jade looks around and sees two bodies in the huddle, cowboy boots and mismatched gloves. The two construction workers that Theo killed. This is where he hid their bodies. This is also why he needed the gas mask. One, to disguise himself, but even though Theo is a slasher, this smell is just as horrid to him as it is to Letha and Jade. Letha can't believe that her dad would kill the founders, but Jade says that it has to be him, that there has to be a reason that he would kill his wife and try to kill his daughter. Letha says that she knows someone else killed them, that it was Stacy Graves. She says that she's seen her before, and Jade says that that was just her dad in a wig. But Letha says that she saw Stacy floating out on the water and that it was definitely her. Convinced that her dad isn't the killer, she stands up and starts to run out of the elk huddle. This is enough to shake the huddle, which all comes crashing down on them in a gory mess. Our last insert is the last essay that Jade wrote for Mr. Holmes. It's about how the movie Jaws is actually a slasher, that the shark has its signature weapon, his teeth. She explains that it has all of the hallmarks in one way or another. It has a final girl despite the character not being a girl, and she's excited to watch the movie on the lake with him that summer. You see, the annual 4th of July movie screening at Indian Lake always shows Jaws. This is why Jade was convinced that the massacre would happen then, because it would have been perfect. The next chapter starts with Jade in the gore pile. She's being crushed and thinks back to all of the deaths that have happened. She feels guilty for wishing for this for so long. She starts to suffocate in the maggot-infested gore pile, but then she sees a light from a flashlight. Letha Mondragon, covered in gore, is pulling her out of the elk pile, and Jade is amazed at this sight. They catch their breaths and know that they need to get back across the lake to the movie that everybody's watching on the water now because they need to get away from Theo and they need to warn everyone. They can see him in the woods a little ways off. He still has the bear trap around his ankle, but he's slowly making his way towards them. Letha still denies that her dad killed all those people. They think about what they can do to get back to the other side of Indian Lake. They can't swim it, and they can't walk there because that'll take them directly past Theo. They can't use the yacht because of the carnage that went down there, and then they see a swan-shaped pedal boat nearby. The Baker twins are usually in it, but they aren't there now. Jade pulls out her lighter and decides to light the elk pile on fire, thinking it might serve as a sort of distraction. The two of them get in the boat and start to pedal towards the rest of Proof Rock. Jade thinks that it's strange that Cinnamon and Ginger weren't killed on the yacht. She thinks that maybe Theo didn't want to kill the kids, but he seemed intent on killing her and Letha, so that would be a little strange. She doesn't really know what to make of this. As they get closer to the screen, they can see the citizens of Proof Rock out on their homemade floats. This is something they do every year, float on the water and watch Jaws. The reason they float on the water and most of them don't swim is because Indian Lake is known for being like super cold. They are like 8,000 feet above sea level up in Idaho, so that makes sense. As they're pedaling towards the screen, Letha mentions Jigsaw, and Jade is shocked to see that she has seen the Saw movies. Letha says that she watched them through her fingers because she was so scared. Sorry if I was laughing there, it took me like 30 takes to say the sentence, Letha mentions Jigsaw, and Jade is shocked to see that she's seen the Saw movies. It's like a tongue twister. But anyways, back to the story. Letha says that she lied to Jade, and that when she found her at her house in Terra Nova, Letha was actually trying to burn down the entire town because she knows that they shouldn't be there. She says that no one was ever supposed to live there after what happened at Camp Blood, that they never should have come here, and Jade starts to get nervous. She thinks that it maybe could be Letha working with her dad, that both of them are the villains in the slasher story. She panics and jumps into the water, swimming towards the screen. I'd say the strongest piece of evidence that Jade has to point to this conclusion is the fact that Letha looked over at her dad, who was like shooting a guy with a nail gun. She didn't see the guy, but she asked if he had gotten rid of them, but then says it was like wasps that he was looking for. So she could be construed as like she's in on this, she knows about it, and that she's just trying to cover for her dad. But anyways, Jade swims for a while before hearing a motorboat coming up behind her. She ducks underneath it and sees that Theo was on it and that he's holding a machete. She tries to scream to warn everyone, but the movie is too loud and no one can hear her. She realizes that she was being dumb earlier and that Letha can't be the killer, it's just Theo. She looks over and sees 3 heads bobbing in the water swimming towards the dock. 2 of them are the Baker twins, and they're holding on to the third, shooting glasses. He has nails in his back, but he did survive. He's been swimming back to the town since the massacre, and the girls are literally holding on to the nails in his back, which sounds incredibly painful. Jade gets up onto one of the floats, and Theo spots her, and she screams at him. This distracts him long enough for shooting glasses to get the twins and himself onto the dock, and as they run away to safety, away from Theo, Jade hears an ear-piercing scream ring out. It's one of the old citizens of Proof Rock, Jocelyn Cates. Her husband next to her has had his jaw ripped off his face. He's bleeding everywhere, and none of this makes sense to Jade at first. She looks around to see what some of the citizens of Proof Rock are wearing. Each year there is a theme for the 4th of July float, and this year it's the Lake Witch, Stacy Graves. Most people are dressed up like her tonight, and Jade looks over at the dock and sees Theo rushing to shooting glasses. They crash into each other and go spilling into the lake. Jade looks to the shore and sees Mr. Holmes, his leg in a cast. He didn't die from the crash after all. She tries to call out to him, but is distracted by Misty Christie's daughter, the girl that she saved earlier in the story. The daughter is bobbing in the water, trying to keep her clearly lifeless mother from drowning. Jade swims over and tells her to get the sheriff and that she'll take care of her mother. Misty's chest has been torn open, and Jade looks around and sees more dead bodies, some with their jaws torn off, and she has no idea what's going on because she knows Theo couldn't do all of this. Jade looks back and sees Mr. Holmes trying to float on his back in the lake. She rushes over to him and sees that his head has been split open. He's clearly dying. An interesting note is that his head is most likely split open from like hitting a float or a boat and not because of being like directly attacked. That's how a lot of the carnage in this scene happens. Also, something I really have to compliment this book on that's not scripted here is that the way this book uses violence and describes it always feels like very impactful and painful in a way that I think isn't done in a lot of horror novels very well. Like, Jade gets beat up in these books in a way that never feels like exploitative, but always feels like really painful. She goes through it so much, but also so does every character. But anyway, back to Jade and Mr. Holmes. She goes over to him and holds him, and everything seems to stop in that moment. She says that she is going to get him help, and he looks up at her and smiles and asks, will she or won't she, the question he asked from earlier. If you don't remember, this is what Jade said her mom was talking about on the phone when Jade was taken to an Idaho Falls doctor to have her stomach pumped when she was 11. I used to live near Idaho Falls. If you don't know that area, Idaho Falls is like, it's not like a big city, but it is like, there's a lot of stuff there. So taking your daughter like several hours out of the way to a clinic there would typically be done if you needed to see a specialist or have something done like maybe having your stomach pumped. It's definitely an odd thing to do. Jade thinks about this question and she knows that Mr. Holmes is going to die. So she finally comes clean to him and says, will she or won't she be a grandma before she's 30? They were at the doctor's office to see if Jade's father had gotten his own daughter pregnant. Jade starts sobbing at this point. I was sobbing at this point. I was crying when I was writing the script, and I'm tearing up right now. It's a really tragic moment that recontextualizes so much of the story. Jade's dad sexually assaulted her as a child. He cornered her in the shower, and that's when her parents split up and she was brought to Idaho Falls for a pregnancy test. Her mom didn't want to do it in Prufrock in order to hide this from the locals. She was protecting her husband, even though he did something completely vile and unforgivable and evil. While she was on the phone, Jade was in the convenience store where she found her first slasher movie. And those movies became sort of a coping mechanism for her. This is why she hates her mom, why she won't talk to her. She was supposed to protect her daughter from the monster, and she just left her with him instead. This explains why her dad is so wary of the sheriff and provides absolutely revolting context to the sexual remarks that both Rexall and her dad make towards her. It also sadly gives some explanation as to Jade's self-harm. That's not uncommon in victims of sexual assault. It makes so much of Jade's actions feel like they make more sense in kind of a soul-crushing way. I have been told and have read online that Jade is one of the most realistically written at-risk teen characters ever. And I have to agree with that statement. None of this feels like it's for shock value. None of it feels like it's just trying to be gross or disturbing in any way. It all makes so much tragic sense. And I've got to get into it because that is such a difficult tightrope to walk when you're writing a horror movie, especially one that's like a slasher movie with all sorts of disturbing things in it. Kind of my first video to really blow up was me talking about the disturbing books iceberg. I made a couple videos on that, and I had to read a lot of like really gross and disturbing novels for that video. And I've talked before about how like disturbing media, like a lot of like really extra like gross, shocking media doesn't really disturb me anymore because I don't think it's like realistic in any way. This book manages to make this feel realistic, even though everything else that's going on in the story is like absolutely insane. And to write a main character that you feel really invested in a slasher series that has insane things in it, like we're just about to see right now, and we talk about the Lake Witch and Stacy Graves and Drown Town and an evil preacher that pulls people down under the water. It's absolutely crazy that this story can do all of that and still manage to make you feel emotion when you get to these moments. I've always been a firm believer that horror is like one of the best genres to express emotion through. That's why I like Mike Flanagan's work so much, like The Haunting of Hill House or especially Midnight Mass, where I feel like horror heightens your emotions already, so you can explore some of these ideas of like loss and grief and trauma in a really interesting way that you can kind of relate to more. So I just want to give Stephen Graham Jones a huge round of applause here because I think he handles this so well in all of his books, and it's something that is sadly kind of lacking in a lot of horror authors. There's a lot of horror authors that almost, I don't want to say they're like fully misogynistic, I don't think that's true all the time, but they do write about women in a way that feels like an objectifying way, or they use them as kind of like these things to be killed and manipulated. But Stephen Graham Jones is really good about taking a female character and giving them a tragic backstory and having terrible things happening to them, but it never feels like exploitative. Back to the story though. Mr. Holmes starts to say something, and he says that someone should do something about this, that someone should have done something about this, and Jade says that someone will, and Mr. Holmes dies. Jade screams to Theo, and she says that he's getting all of the wrong people. Then she starts to swim towards her dad's float, and she picks up a sharp piece of splintered wood on the way there. She climbs onto his float, sneaking up behind him, and stabs him in the back with the stake. She's thought of what she would say before 1,000 times, but what she gets out now is, "I wasn't for you." He looks back at her confused, and she thinks he must have been drunk, and that's the only way he could live with himself for the past 7 years after doing what he did to her. He must not remember. She tries to stab the stake further into him, but she can't bring herself to do it. He looks at her and laughs. He calls her Jennifer, which is her full first name, but she always goes by Jade, and Jade hears someone behind him say, "It's Jade." Letha Mondragon is holding a board with a nail through it. She slams it into the side of Jade's dad's head, the nail driving into his temple and pulling his cheek clean off his face when she pulls it away. Letha looks at Jade and tells her that he'll never hurt her again as her dad tumbles into the water. Jade looks around for Theo and says that this doesn't make any sense. Theo can't be killing everyone right now. He can't get around that fast. She sees Sheriff Hardy on his motorboat and looks back at Letha, and her jaw is being ripped off by an unseen force. Jade hears Letha's jaw snap and sees that she's thrown into the water beside the raft. The final girl is dead. In her place, Jade sees the figure of a ghostly girl with long dark hair. It's the lake witch, Stacy Graves. Stacy screams at Jade and her own jaw dislocates. She puts it back into place and Jade starts to piece everything together. It wasn't Theo killing everyone, it's been Stacy Graves as well. She was lost in the lake and dragged out by her jaw from the hook on the truck, and that's what made her a vengeful spirit. And now she kills anyone who tries to stay on her side of the lake. She killed the founders for trying to build somewhere that doesn't belong to them, and she's killing the citizens of Proof Rock for mocking her with their costumes of her. Theo Mondragon looks towards his dead daughter and picks up his machete. He points it at Stacy Graves and says, "You," and it seems like he knows about her already. She floats over towards him and he swings the machete at her, but she ducks underneath it. She picks him up from the canoe he's on and slams his body against the boat, killing him. Jade hears gunshots and sees that Sheriff Hardy has shot Stacy Graves 4 times, but it doesn't seem to affect her. There's new holes in her body, but they just sort of leak this weird black fluid. Jade rushes over to the machete, and she knows that it's the weapon of a final girl, and starts to think that maybe she's the one that has to do it. Stacy Graves rushes over to her. She pulls her out of the canoe and the two of them start floating up, and Jade brings her machete with her. Stacy looks at her shaved head, seemingly confused, and Jade thinks that Stacy must have never seen a bald lady before. She uses this distraction to bring the machete hard into the side of Stacy Graves' torso, and it doesn't do much more damage than Hardy's bullets did. I do want to mention real quick this kind of plot thread of Jade shaving her head. It came up earlier and I didn't mention it, but I think I should have wrote into the script. When she ducks underneath the boat that Theo Mondragon is on, she says that if her hair had been there, it would have been caught up in the propeller and she would have died. And now the hair has almost saved her again because Stacy got confused at it. It plays with the idea in horror stories and movies that the final girl has to start making decisions for themselves and making bold decisions, and that's what ends up saving them, even if it's something small. Jade deciding to cut her hair off, which has always been kind of the symbol of her crazy life, and it's all gross and she's put shoe polish in it. Her idea to cut it all off is kind of her like cutting those losses and saying like, I want to be rid of this, I want to do something else now. And her decision to leave that behind, not necessarily her trauma behind, not the things that her dad did to her, but for her to take a step forward and say that I am my own person now, my dad doesn't own me, it ends up saving her a couple times. Her slamming the machete into Stacy Graves does cause Stacy to drop Jade, who retreats under the water. Stacy floats down to her and waits for her to resurface, and Jade realizes that Stacy can't go under the water. Jade theorizes that Stacy is unable to go under the water because that lake is essentially owned by Ezekiel, who is a Christian preacher, and Stacy Graves is a Native American. Her theory is that the lake will reject Stacy because it's technically a Christian burial ground, where Stacy belongs in an Indian burial ground. Also, I do want to say, I know I've been using the phrase like Indian burial ground. That's what the book calls it specifically, and Stephen Graham Jones refers to himself a lot as an American Indian. I don't know what like the proper terminology for everything is, but I just try to do what it says in the book, so sorry if that's been like insensitive or out of touch. But anyway, Jade waits below the surface until Stacy is staring down at her and her head is within reach. Jade reaches up and grabs Stacy, pulling her down with her. Stacy bites Jade's hand, piercing her fingers with her sharp teeth. Jade holds on, dragging Stacy down until a pale hand reaches up from the depths of the lake and grabs Stacy by the ankles. It's the hand of Ezekiel the preacher, claiming Stacy for his own. With this, Jade Daniels defeats Stacy Graves, but she's sinking herself now, too tired to make it to the surface again. A hand reaches into the water and pulls her out. It's Letha Mondragon. She's a mess and her jaw is fully dislocated and torn off, but her skin has just barely held it in place. She pulls Jade out of the water and onto the raft that she's on. Banner Tompkins looks at this and calls out to the rest of the town. He says that Letha defeated Stacy Graves, that she saved them all, and Jade dives back into the water. She swims until she finds another boat. It's the town canoe. She climbs in and sees that the machete is there, and she picks it up and thinks about the end of Friday the 13th. She knows that there was always one last scare, and right on cue, Stacy Graves rises up from the water behind her, and Jade turns around and slashes the machete into her without even looking. Except it isn't Stacy Graves, it's Jade's dad. He wasn't killed by Letha, he survived. Jade is sliced about halfway through his neck, and it's enough to kill him for sure this time. Before he sinks below the surface, Jade says, "I trusted you, Dad. Tab Daniels sinks down to be with the other cursed inhabitants of Drowned Town. She looks back to see another teenager, Tiffany Koenig, recording her with her cell phone. She has just recorded Jade Daniels killing her father while he was defenseless. She tries to explain herself, but she knows that all of this will be blamed on her, that she's been setting herself up to take the fall for this massacre for her entire life. She screams. She decides that if she's going to die, she wants to do it at home. Not her father's house, but her true home, Camp Blood. She swims there and passes out in one of the cabins. She wakes up to what she thinks is the dawn, before realizing that it's a forest fire. The elk pile that she lit up has started a blaze that is going to burn down all of Proof Rock and most likely all of Idaho. Jade knows that if this fire can spread across the lake, it's going to burn everything down, and the only way to stop it is to raise the water level using the dam control room. She rushes over to the dam and carefully walks on the top of it to get to the control booth. She breaks the glass of the windows and gets inside. There's no instruction manual inside, but Jade figures that changing the controls from all the way down to all the way up has to do something. And it works. The water starts rising. She exits the control booth to run back across the dam to freedom, but she sees that the blaze is on either side of her. She also sees a bear cub and his mother running across the dam towards her. She climbs onto the roof of the control building to get out of their way, and she sees the wild grizzly from earlier chasing the cub. The mama bear stands between the cub and the grizzly, protecting her child. And this is the last paragraph of the book. This mother's saying that if this bad man wants her baby, then he's gonna have to come through her to get it. And Jade has to look up to the sky to keep her eyes from spilling. And for a moment, the smoke parts enough for a grainy line of sunlight to filter through, find the palm of her hand when she reaches up to try to hold this feeling for as long as she can. And that is Stephen Graham Jones' My Heart is a Chainsaw. I loved this book a lot more than I thought I was going to, but let's go over everything one last time. Stacy Graves drowns in the lake decades before the story starts. She's pulled from the lake and isn't dead. She runs away and starts to haunt Terra Nova. The founders move in and the construction workers discover the caverns underneath the land of Terra Nova. Grayson Brust falls into one of the caves and starts going crazy. They're paid off by Deacon Samuels to keep this a secret since he doesn't want to scare the other founders away. Later, the Dutch students are killed on the lake by Stacy Graves. She tears their jaws off. At the same time, a killer grizzly is killing elk on the shores of the lake. The bear ends up killing Deacon Samuels. Later, annoyed at his ultralight aircraft, Theo Mondragon shoots Mr. Holmes out of the sky in the presence of the construction workers. He decides that he needs to tie up those loose ends, so he kills two of the construction workers and almost kills shooting glasses with a nail gun, but he gets away. Later that night, Stacy Graves appears on the yacht and kills almost everyone on board. Theo Mondragon goes looking for Letha and Jade because he's actually concerned for their safety at this point. Letha and Jade hide in the elk pile where Theo hid the bodies of the people he killed, but it collapses on them. Letha escapes and frees Jade, who lights the pile on fire. They make their way to the 4th of July movie screening of Jaws on the lake, where Theo tries to kill Shooting Glasses, who has saved the Baker twins. He is interrupted by Stacy Graves, who floats above the water and starts killing people. Jade uses this chaos to find her dad and stab him, but she can't kill him, however. Letha appears behind Jade's dad and caves his face in with a plank with a nail through it. Her jaw is then nearly ripped off by Stacy, who throws her into the water. Stacy kills Theo and some more people before Jade drags her under the water. The ghostly preacher of Drowned Town, Ezekiel, drags Stacy to the murky depths of Indian Lake. Jade is saved by Letha and then climbs back into the town canoe where she inadvertently kills her dad, who rises from the water behind her like Jason in Friday the 13th. She is caught on camera by another teenager and flees to Camp Blood. She wakes up to the forest burning, raises the water of the lake to save Proof Rock, and passes out on top of the dam control booth while watching the mother bear protect her cub from the killer grizzly. Pretty wild, right? It's interesting that the story has 3 killers: Stacy Graves, the grizzly, and Theo Mondragon. There are aspects of the story that don't get fully explained until the later books in the series, but I think the story works really well on its own, and I certainly enjoyed it. I like how Jade's obsession with slashers was used as a way to explore her repressed trauma. None of it ever feels cliche to me, and I think that's really impressive. I also love the parallel of Jade attempting to end her own life in the town canoe at the beginning as an homage to Friday the 13th, only for that to come back around when she kills her dad. She started out believing that death was the only way out of her problems, and it ends with her finally taking revenge on the man that did the unspeakable to her. I think the entire dynamic between Jade and her dad is really interesting because it's kind of mostly unspoken throughout the story, but when you go back and look at it, it really does feel like almost like a slasher story. He is the villain of her life, and she ends up becoming her own final girl and taking him out even with a machete, which is a classic final girl weapon. Now, Jade will never, ever, ever say that she's the final girl, But in this story, I do think there are two final girls, one being Jade and one being Letha. I was fully expecting there to be a twist where Letha was like actually the killer or something, or she wasn't the final girl. And I think it's interesting that she is established as like, yes, she fits the final girl trope, and that's what she is, and she saves people, and she gets like the credit for saving everybody from Stacy Graves when it was really Jade, so Jade's kind of like the undercover final girl. I also love how all of the adults in Jade's life that aren't her parents or Rexall seem to really care for her. Sheriff Hardy and Mr. Holmes were concerned for her and just wanted to help her. Overall, I think this is a really solid story and a great first book in a trilogy that I really, really loved. I don't know which of the books I like the most. I'm thinking like, at first I was like, I think I like My Heart is a Chainsaw the most, but now I'm like, I might like the second one more. The third one was also really good. It's just a fantastic series. But this video is getting way too long at this point, so I'm going to wrap things up here now. If you've read this book, then please let me know what you thought about it. If you like this video and you'd like to see me cover other books in this series, then please let me know in the comments below. It's been a while since I've made a long video about a horror novel, but I felt that this book deserved it. I'm not expecting this video to like do particularly well, but I don't care. I just wanted to make it. If you came here from one of my internet horror videos, then thank you so much for watching this long video about horror literature. I love making these videos and it means so much to me that so many of you guys watch them. Again, if you like what I do here and want to see more, then please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to reach 100,000 subs by the end of 2025. If you want to see me talk about another horror novel, then please consider watching my video on The Troop by Nick Cutter or my video on the anthology book Found. If you want to hear me talk about internet horror, then you can watch my SCP, Pen Pal, or Creepypasta analysis videos. Those are a ton of fun as well. If you want to support me further, then consider becoming a channel member where for just $3 a month, you'll get access to my Discord, members-only videos, early access to all my videos, and access to my members-only book club. You'll also get your name in the credits of all my videos like you're seeing on the screen right now. A massive thank you to all my gold tier members, Amanda Mapes, Lucas Fernando, Chris Lamb, Ezra, Silent Trails, Blue Radio Media, Tyler the Leper, Vix Corner, Mistjoy16, Coco Boko, Cherry Shark, Savage John, Moonson Blog, Starlight Pink, Jackson Moore, Amanda Castillon, Lexi, Arcade Link Author, Pyrocat B, The Official Gar, Passion the Fruit, Wyvab Flow, Hi, Sapo Dapos, Semra, Laura Gonzalez, Floral Paws, Rafael Sampiao, Classic Pats Games Plus, Miranda M, Lemonade Slug, Hito Brine, Ben Best, Mary Elizabeth, Anexinem, Sumstar, Digital Fox 615, and Sherbert. Your support means so much to me. I was out of town last week, and this video kind of snuck up on me, and I ended up needing to work like 30 hours in 2 days to get it done. Thanks for always supporting me so I can afford to put that much time into the videos that I make for you guys. And now it's time for the secret end of the video where I drop some Davis Morgan lore on you guys, something super quick this time. I'll just say that I grew up playing piano, I played percussion in middle and high school, and I did some choir in high school and college. And me and one of my best friends used to have choir right after lunch my senior year, and we would try to get food and then get back quick enough to eat it before like the warm-ups started. Our teacher was like kind of going through a mental breakdown that whole year, so sometimes he would start class like a full 10 minutes late, but then other times he would start like right on time and be really strict and kind of scary. And one day we went to Little Caesars during lunch to get some pizza. I think our lunch was like 25 minutes in total, and it probably took us like 8 minutes to drive there and 8 minutes to drive back, which left us like 9 minutes to eat the pizza. But when we got there, they didn't have any pizzas hot and ready like they're supposed to, and they said it would take about 10 minutes, and we were like, okay, we have 9 minutes left, it'll take them 10 minutes, and we were like, cool. And then eventually they gave us a fresh pizza. I was driving us back to the school, and my friend thought it would be a great idea to try to eat a piece of this like freshly baked pizza, like straight out of the oven, and it just had this absolutely molten lava cheese on it that burned his tongue. And then we got back to the school and went to the choir room, and we're like, okay, chances are they haven't started warm-ups, and our choir teacher had started class early for some reason, so we had to eat our lava cheese pizza in the hallway. I just thought that was a fun little story from my high school career experience, I guess. Thank you for listening to me talk for over an hour. It really does mean the world to me. I love what I do and you guys make all of this possible. I just thought that was kind of a funny story from my high school experience or career or whatever. Thank you guys so much for listening to me talk for over an hour. It really does mean the world to me. I love what I do and you guys make all of this possible for me. Also, I've got to address the elephant in the room. I did switch clothes halfway through this video because I peed myself. No, I didn't pee myself. I recorded half of this in the morning and was like really, really tired. I didn't get much sleep last night, so I recorded the second half later in the day. I didn't want to like go and change back into my old clothes. But I think that's actually going to do it for this video, so I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.